That's right, Moto fans. It's another Always Moto production, and it's brought to you by Leat Moto Australia and Technic Motorsport. As always, I'm your host, David Hogan, the Australian physiotherapist that knows the injuries in our sport of motocross and supercross. It's another edition of the Emergency Department. We are looking at the injuries and the rider fitnesses ahead of round 6 of the AMA Supermotocross series from Glendale, Arizona. There's lots to update this week after a wild East Coast 250 opener at Detroit, along with some check ins from the rehab ward for riders making their way along the recovery path. Let's get to it. Seth Hammaker of the Pro Circuit Kawasaki team had a crash in qualifying. Now, reports are that he was cleared by the Alpine Star medical crew of any injury that would prevent him from riding on. But was that assessment enough to rule out the possible concussion that rumors have followed that he was unable to remember the actual crash? I believe it's time for an update to the AMA concussion protocol to bring us in line with the other top level sports with things like mandatory stand down times that are longer than just a week that allows our riders conveniently to be able to be ready for the next race the following week. Jeremy Martin on that Club MX Yamaha unfortunately had a very ugly looking crash in his heat race, suffering a concussion. As per reports from the Club MX press release this week, it's just a minor concussion. Jeremy is on the AMA concussion protocol. With the gap between round 1 and round 2 for the East Coast 250s, he should be able to be cleared from that and return for round 2. But that will all depend on how he progresses through that AMA protocol for the concussion that he suffered there in Detroit. Evan Ferry on that new Triumph managed to find his way from an LCQ win to the outside of the start on that main event for the 250s and pushed right out wide in that turmoil that happened there for the opening corner. Found himself meeting the wall with a few bikes pushing him towards it. Unfortunately for Evan, managed to bump into that and was unable to finish the race. As per his update this week, he was a little sore, but he's doing A-OK and should be back. Like we just stated for Jeremy Martin, he'll have that 3-week break between rounds from round 1 to round 2. Should be A-OK come round 2. Jet Reynolds on that Club MX Yamaha was attempting to make his pro debut for the Supercross series. The last time he attempted to do it, he didn't make it out of press day 2 years ago. This time round, he managed to make it out of press day, but unfortunately, in one of the opening round qualifying sessions, had a crash, managed to have an AC joint separation, a grade 2 separation. Now, AC joint is just on this side, out from his collarbone where it meets the shoulder blade. It's the ligament that attaches over the top. It gets sprained in that scenario. Now, for a grade 2, it's around a 2 to 4 week recovery time frame. They are responsive to being able to ride through if you use things like tape and pain-killing injections. But given the 3-week break, he will be doing plenty of rehab in that time, as per my check-in with Mike Bonacci at Club MX. He should have plenty of time to rehab it. How fit and ready he'll be come round 2 in 3 weeks' time for the East Coast series, we don't know. So check back on our future episodes to see how his fitness is progressing. Cullen Park on that Phoenix Racing Honda had a crazy night in Detroit for the opening round, unfortunately ending in injury. In the main event, he managed to case a jump and dislocate his wrist. Now, as per the team press release that's come out today, he has undergone surgery for that wrist. Now, we don't have details on the full injury at this stage, but surgery would indicate that he's then completely ruptured a ligament or potentially broken a bone with that dislocation. We'll check in further with Cullen and bring more updates as we know them. But unfortunate for Cullen, he'll be out for the Supercross series at this stage. Chance Hymas on the HRC Honda was having an interesting night for a pro debut for him in Supercross, leading some laps in his heat, being up there in the main event. But in both scenarios, he dropped back. Now, the reports are that he managed to dab his foot and re-injure or re-aggravate the knee that he had repaired from the outdoors. Now, if you remember back at High Point, he ran really well, but that week before, or the break between High Point and Redbud in last year's outdoor series, he managed to rupture his ACL. He had that repaired. Now, he's only sort of 7 months or so back on the bike, so he's in that window where it's still reasonably close in his recovery timeframe, but he's back racing, obviously ready to go. But if he's dabbed his knee, there is that risk that he has re-ruptured it. At best case scenario, he's just sprained the joint, maybe got a little bruise in a bone from banging them together there by dabbing the foot. Worst case scenario, he's re-ruptured it. Now, we have checked in with Chance. He hasn't given us heaps of details. He says he is doing a lot of rehab to try and be ready to go for round 2 in 3 weeks' time. How well this will go, time will tell, and we'll obviously find out more from Chance as the weeks go on, whether he's able to continue to ride through or not. Ideally, it's only minor, but we'll have to wait and see. If he has re-ruptured it, it will be an extended period if he has, with the rehab that we have to do and potentially further surgery. So watch this space, but hope for good news from Chance Hymas on that HRC Honda. Lorenzo Lacurcio on that Wildcat Gas team, unfortunately, was ill coming into the opening round for Detroit. Managed to ride one of the qualifying sessions, but was unable to continue on and pulled out of the night show. He should be all healed up, recovered from the illness by the time round 2 rolls around. Brock Pappy provided an update this week after Detroit. He was unable to compete in the mains part of the event as well. Unfortunately, in an opening qualifying session, he managed to have a collision with another rider, which bruised his hand, caused it to swell. He was unable to grip the bike for the evening events. Apparently, nothing is broken, which is good news. Ideally, he'll be able to rehab that hand and get that swelling down over the coming weeks and be ready for round 2. But we'll check back with Brock prior to the round 2 for East Coast 250s. Some updates from the recovery ward now. Joan Cross has been riding through this season, but has recently put out an update that he's been unable to train during the week. Apparently at Anaheim 1, he had a couple of rib injuries and has been unable to train during the week. And he's just reported that he's feeling good enough to start doing that again. So hopefully that will mean that his results will improve over the coming weeks once he's able to get a bit more bike time midweek. We checked in with Jonah Geisler, who had some injuries in his wrist and his elbows in pre-season. Jonah's been actually helping out with his team this year as a team manager. And at this stage, he's not planning on returning to racing for the 2024 season. He did indicate that he might do that in 2025, but at this stage, he's quite happy enjoying life as a team manager. So you'll probably catch him in the pits, but not with his gear on in 2024. We checked in with the host Grindstone Kawasaki team and Dylan Walsh. Dylan had that injury to his intestine where he had a laceration at Anaheim 1 to that area. Unfortunately, had to undergo an open surgery to his abdomen region to repair that intestine. The team has indicated that he is recovering quite well. He is expected not to be back on the bike this week at Glendale for the West Coast return, but the West Coast riders are having an extended break here as the East Coast series kicks off in a few weeks' time. That will mean that he's planning to be back in time for Seattle. We've checked in with privateer Richard Taylor this week after see how his recovery is going from his femur fracture that occurred back in October, November of 2023. Unfortunately for Richard, things aren't going to plan at this stage. The femur fracture is currently still classed as a non-union, meaning that the bone has not repaired itself. Unfortunately, at this stage, there is no plans for bone grafting or further surgery to sort of clean up the area and re-encourage further bone growth. The plan from his doctors is to just give him more time. So he's got another checkup in 6 weeks further time. So ideally, by that point, the bone has finally decided to unite and become unioned. If that is not the case, then obviously they'll have to look into things that are occurring further. Now, unfortunately for Richard as well, he's suffering some hip pain because of all these things that are going on. Now, as per many of you know, when you have a leg injury or an injury to the other part of the body, you manage to compensate. And unfortunately, it seems like the load is going through Richard's hip and he's having a fair bit of pain and discomfort in that area too. It might be from a part of an injury at that same point of that femur fracture, but it's not known at this stage. And even if it is, he wouldn't be able to have anything done surgically to it until the femur fracture had healed. So it's a bit of an extended recovery time frame at this stage for Richard Taylor. Hopefully things start to turn around for him and things can improve, and especially that femur fracture can join back up and become one. That would be very good for Richard Taylor. And our last rider update in this episode of the emergency department is Kevin Moran's. From Kevin Moran's Racing KTM, he has had that concussion a few weeks ago when he was practicing on a private track. Kevin has been taking the right course to sit out and make sure he's fully recovered, but Kevin is going to be back for Glendale this week. Welcome back, Kevin. That's it for another week on the emergency department. Be sure to check out leatmoto.com.au as well as technicmotorsport.com. Links for everything Always Moto are in the show notes. And if you want to support us here at the show, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. Until next week, guys and girls, remember that time will heal 99% of everything.